right, good evening. First off, welcome back from the New Year, so hopefully everybody had a good holiday, and Happy New Year's to all of you. Welcome to the February 6, 2024 City of Minot Planning Commission meeting. Call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Bacon, Gates, Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Here.
Johnson,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Here.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanila.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
All right, with that, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4, and that's the approval of the December 2023 regular meeting minutes. Turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler, second by Commissioner Domes. Any discussion? That was a long time ago, but any discussion from December? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the discussion. We'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Pontanila.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Moving on to agenda item number 5, continued from December 5th, 2023. This is still an open public hearing. Conditional use permit from Seeds of Eden. It's a public hearing request by Isaiah Keller representing Lars Wingstrom on behalf of CXL LLC, owner for a conditional use permit for a group home for up to 12 residents plus staff. The legal description of the property is Lot 1, Blaisdell subdivision of Block 13, Ramstad's rear view subdivision to the city of Minot. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right. I think at this point you guys are all fairly familiar with the property, but we'll go over it again. The subject property is outlined in white here. The pink line represents the 300-foot notification buffer. The current zoning on this is R3B, which is the equivalent of our current RM, medium density residential district. Group homes are permitted by right for up to 6 residents within the R3B district. It is a conditional use for 7 to 12 residents. The future land use map has this designated as suburban residential, but it is on the fringe of the downtown fringe area. Here are some site photos. This is the front of the subject property facing east. This is facing north to give you context on the location of the property. It is right next to the old Trinity campus. I've added a picture for parking along 5th Avenue. This is part of the change to the application that we'll get into later. But this is the parking lot on 5th Avenue. And this is facing north of the rear of the building, also giving some context to the parking available in the rear of the building. This is the evaluative criteria. Gone over this a couple of times. It's outlined in the staff report. Also, finding of fact. These are also outlined in the staff report. It is worth mentioning that staff now finds that the proposal satisfies evaluative criteria 2 through 4, which I'll provide additional clarification to on in a moment. As it's a conditional use application, the Planning Commission has the authority to approve or deny with or without conditions on this particular application. So this is where the staff has changed the recommendation with the inclusion of the lease that was included in as an added to the application, staff recommends that the planning commission adopt staff finding of fact and approve the conditional use permit for a group home for up to 12 residents, with the condition that the parking lease be maintained for at least 5 additional spaces, or an alternative is in place prior to the lease being allowed to expire. This is a 6-month lease for 5 spaces, with it going month to month after the initial 6 months. So that is why staff has added the condition of the lease being maintained. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Doug, so do they have to notify you how do you find out whether or not that lease has been terminated?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, I would hope that they would notify us immediately if the parking situation were to change in any way. Other than that, it would likely come up in some sort of complaint from adjacent property owner would be likely the way we would find out. There was parking congestion issues related to the group home, and that then we would investigate and find whether the lease was still active.
Thank you.
And one quick question, at that point, would we revoke this CUP then?
Chairman Offerdahl, yes, I'm recommending that you pass it with that condition added to the conditional use permit. It's a conditional use permit, so you can add any conditions to it. I would recommend that if this condition is no longer being met, that it would immediately void the permit.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. To the planner. What are the plans for the future? Apparently, this is a maximum of 12. So are there any plans for expansion? And if so, is the parking going to be a problem? And if the expansion occurs, what recourse will we have? If this is passed now and then 5 months down the road, you don't get information and we don't get information. And once that program has been initiated, what then if they no longer provide that kind of property for parking? Because I believe that was a problem with the residents in the area having some problems with this being authorized to have this service.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Domes, in this zoning district, they are only allowed up to 12. As a maximum residency, they cannot expand any further beyond the 12 residents. So you are granting a conditional use permit to max out the residency of this home. In the future, if they were to, say, just expand the building footprint without increasing the residency, just to have more space for the residents, and that would have to come through as a building permit, and it would immediately throw up some red flags for the community development department as a whole, that an expansion of this building would could further exacerbate a precarious parking for this.
Again, through the chair, does that building have the capacity for up to 12 or only 12? Do you know?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Jones, that would be a question for the building inspections as they go in and do these renovations to the building. They would only be given a building permit to build it out for 12 residents, to have 12 living quarters within the building, and they would need their occupancy certificate for each of those rooms. They need to be checked for things like egress and a whole host of other issues that come up during the building permit process. So that would be, our inspections department would be our primary source of information on the progress of the renovation of the building itself and what that building is capable of housing as far as maximum occupancy. That has to do with square footage and a whole lot of questions I can't answer, but our primary source for the planning division for answers on something like that would be our inspections department and our building official.
I'm not really concerned about the building itself. I'm just thinking down the road, our city has been encumbered with a number of projects which, not looking far enough down the road, has led to problems and oftentimes difficulty enforcing it, especially seeing that the residents in that area had some questions about it. And I'm just wondering whether those down the road circumstances have been properly addressed to allow this at this point, especially if the parking permit is for only 5 months.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Domes, this is a permit for 12 people maximum. Exceeding that number would also immediately void the permit. It would put them out of, they're only permitted for 12 people total for here in perpetuity. They can't exceed that number without violating the conditions of their conditional use permit. Again, we would likely find out about this from a complaint that would lead to a zoning enforcement case being opened. And there would be additional investigations and possibly other aspects to that investigation, but it would violate the conditions of their conditional use permit and void the permit. It's a permit from the city, and any violation of the conditions of that permit voids the permit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for city staff? All right, seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Is there anybody wishes to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Anybody want to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I'd move to approve, I think it's a whole mouthful here, based on staff finding of fact with all of the conditions and the additional condition that the special use permit be revoked if the parking lease is terminated?
The way I had written it is, or if they have an approved alternative in place prior to the allowing it to expire. If they were to,
Or if they have an
Hypothetically,
approved
yeah.
alternative to the lease prior to its termination?
I don't want to tell them they can't purchase parking land or something like that. If they find a viable alternative.
Just don't let me have to say it again.
I was a little worried too. Do I have to repeat all that?
No.
Okay, I approved,
Second?
or I second, sorry.
Okay, so we got a motion by Commissioner Kibler, and we got a second by Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close it and call it to roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes?
Abstain.
Iverson? Kibler?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes,
Longton?
Yes.
Minot?
yes,
Offerdahl?
Yes.
And Pontanillo?
yes,
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, Avery Second Edition Preliminary Plat. Public hearing request by Wayne Johnson, property owner for a preliminary plat to consolidate several properties into 2 lots. The proposed subdivision to be named Avery Second Edition, being a replat of Outlot 27 of the southeast quarter, southwest quarter, southwest quarter, southeast quarter, and southeast quarter, southwest quarter, less a portion southwest quarter, southeast quarter, less road portion sold, and outlot 2, 8, 9, 12, 25, 26, and 28 in Lot 1 Avery's addition. With that, we'll turn it over to staff.
That was very good, yeah.
Very well.
We're happy they're turning this into Lot 1 and Lot 2, right? All right, the subject property is seen here. It is located in southeast Minot, outside of city limits in the extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. Subject property is outlined in black here. Because it's in the ETJ, it did have a 600-foot notification boundary. And that is outlined in red. Here is a view of the preliminary plat for Avery's second addition to the city of Minot. Current zoning of the property is ag, or agricultural district, with some M1 and R1 and some other zoning adjacent, but primarily it's an ag area. Future land use is rural residential, and there is a small portion that is flagged for light industrial. That portion would be an unbuildable lot if it were to be subdivided off. So here's the property looking northwest. Here's the property driveway. It's agricultural. There is a homestead back there currently. Here's the staff finding of fact as outlined in the staff report. And staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the staff finding of fact and recommend to the City Council that they approve the major subdivision preliminary plat for Avery's second addition with the condition that right-of-way along the section line to the south and required utility easements be dedicated on the final plat. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for city staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Doug, are there two access roads, one for each outlot here?
So we'll go back to the plat, or one of the maps here so that I can kind of show you. Come on. All right, so as you can see, that's 30th Avenue on the north side of the property. And then I believe it is 28th, I want to say 28th Street on the south side of the property. That 28th Street on the south side is the section line.
Okay.
That is where the 33 feet of right-of-way dedication is required, or is requested, and required by our LDO. It was requested by the engineering department that it be added per the requirement of our LDO. And the right-of-way on the north side is already in place, but the land development ordinance does require that they set aside a 10-foot easement for utilities along existing roads. But yes, they are both accessible directly from.
Okay, is it that plat line that, for the northern section that comes off the road? Is that the access point?
Yes, the access point currently to the homestead is off of 30th on the northeast side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Feel free, sir.
I guess I'm not understanding how you're zoning it now. This is my property.
Okay, you can come up to the podium and maybe put your name on the book there and let's introduce yourself. That'd be great.
Okay, I'm Wayne Johnson. I own the property there. I guess Lot 1, as you see there, I bought that, and there was no access to go in and out of that place. There's a driveway there which was owned by the Averys. They own all that 40 acres below that in Lot 2, I think, if you want to go back to that previous map. Lot 2 is owned by the Averys, and I bought that little sliver there of 1.6 acres. And I just wanted to, I don't know how you're zoning all this. Is it all still agriculture? Is that what we're doing here?
My recommendation would be to keep it all ag zoned. Primarily the property is.
Because originally you were gonna do an M1 there on that 1.6 acres. And then they replotted it again with Wald. And that's all I'm trying to do is buy this access road because she would not let, or Avery's would not let me drive in and out of the driveway to get in there because that's the only way in there. So I had to buy that from her, the Avery family. And we just need to join it in with my Lot 1 is what I'm trying to get to.
Chairman Offerdahl, originally it did come in with 3 lots with that sliver to the north being separated out. And as I had mentioned, future land use, it never got a zoning designation now because we didn't have an appropriate legal description or a descriptive enough legal description for the engineering department to actually add it to our parcel mapper. So it was unzoned. But it fell under a future land use of M1. And they had kind of subdivided it off on its own, but a 1.3 acre M1 lot would have created an unbuildable, little sliver of land that would have had a zoning designation that really didn't fit the area. So they came back and modified the plat to just have Lot 1 and Lot 2 and include that portion in Lot 1. So I guess staff recommendation would be that the majority of that lot is agricultural. There is no M1 use on the property. It's being absorbed into Lot 1, which is agricultural, so that zoning designation would just stay with Lot 1 and be extended to cover that sliver of land that has future M1. If anyone were to ever purchase a portion of that, say the adjacent industrial use wanted to purchase, then they could come in and request a rezoning to have it zoned appropriately for an industrial use. But staff recommendation would be that Lot 1 and Lot 2 maintain an ag district zoning designation. No change of zoning has been requested by the applicant.
So you're okay with that? You're not requesting it to be M1, you're okay
I
with it
wanted
being
to leave
ag?
it all just ag and
Okay.
join that into Lot 1.
Perfect.
And that's all I'm trying to do.
Perfect, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Any questions, any other questions while he's up here? Mr. Johnson's up here? Great description, by the way, Principal Planner, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item up here? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Anybody wishing to speak for or against this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations and finding of fact.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Baumann and a second by Commissioner Longton. Is that right? Any discussion? Any discussion? Perfect. Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanila.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, other business. I'm going to turn this over. I believe we might just run through this real quick, but discuss this in the future, right? I'll let you take this over, Brian.
Well, actually, that came from Commissioner Bauman.
Do you want to touch base on this, Commissioner Baumann, a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So item number 7, I asked Mr. Dietrichson to just send this article out for everyone for review and consideration. If you remember, in December, I asked for a broader discussion over the coming months, just talking about the concept of parking minimums and just knowing in my own personal conversations with people, that's definitely a subject that maybe we don't think about often. So this article was included mostly to help us educate ourselves, and for any of the general public that are listening, this is accessible via the packets online in the Agenda Center as well. So any member of the public can access this and kind of learn a little bit more about what parking minimums are. But one thing I really appreciate about the article is that it kind of takes a broad view of, as cities and communities, both the size of Minot, larger than Minot, and smaller than Minot, kind of look at parking requirements, what they do as a community, where their priorities are in terms of parking minimums or maximums, and just what they do with assigning parking for buildings and new development. I thought it laid out very clearly some of the pros and cons and some of the things that really need to be considered in a world that is mostly still car-centric, but is not as much as it was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. And so just making sure that we're keeping the cost of development and building in our community fair and equitable, keeping housing accessible and development space accessible, and we're not over-parking our community, but we're still making sure we have what we need. So I hope everyone got a chance to do that. I've gotten to read this article several times. I've talked about it with Mr. Dietrichson on several occasions. But I also, if anyone wants to talk about it, I thought maybe now might be an okay time if there are questions about what are parking minimums. Without going too much into the weeds, obviously, we'll probably have some more information from staff in the coming months. But figured this was a good way to start the conversation.
Thank you. Any questions for Vice Chair Bauman?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, not a question, but I think a large concern when it comes to eliminating parking minimums. The problems tend to be when, say, a business is butt up against a community, and any kind of overage of parking adversely affects that community. And it's been a long time since that article came around. Did the article address these kinds of concerns and in any way talk about how you would deal with that kind of problem? Well, and it happened with the bank, right? The Hovens Bank, underbuilt parking, and all the neighbors got a petition up to ensure that they not be allowed to have that permit or allow a certain amount of traffic into that parking lot, given that it was illegal. And I don't know how it was ultimately resolved, but it was a community action against the bank because they underbuilt parking, and it meant cars were going to be in the community. And this, I think, was a broad concern, isn't it?
I'm not super familiar with that particular case and action, but I think that's a great question to be asking and to kind of be thinking and looking at.
Any further discussion? I believe this will be something that you guys are going to address in the future, right?
Yes.
Yes, we've started doing some staff side
Okay.
research on this, Chairman, and I'll introduce Dan here in a little bit to you guys, but it's been a project that's been assigned to the associate planner for comparisons, very initial stages of research being done, mainly finding out where our goal is to find out where we stand compared to other communities. That's generally where planners start. So, but yeah, there's some research has already started in the division as far as looking into this topic. So,
Okay.
and I went down the rabbit hole on this one. I followed the links, and then I followed the links and the links and the links and the links and the links. And I really went down the rabbit hole on this article and kind of until it became circular on the academic side of it. So we're looking into it and starting our research on it. So
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate for us to get a copy of the ordinance regarding parking in RC right now?
I think that's a fair request, and I think that we can work with the city staff to maybe send that out to the commission so
Yeah,
that they can review that.
We can do that, yeah.
It's a starting point for me.
Yes.
Sure.
I mean, and this is a great avenue, I believe, in to start this discussion with the informational pieces and what you requested. So I appreciate everybody's involvement in this and kind of going down there so that we can kind of come together and make a decision based on information that everybody's had a chance to review and not just be spot checked at the time. So, did you have something else, Commissioner Kibler?
Do I look like it?
So you raised your hand.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just sort of wondering, is the origins of this minimal parking study related to the expansion and the new vision for downtown, or is it just a separate philosophical issue that cities deal with? What's the origins?
Yeah, I'd be happy to field that question if it's okay, because I'm the one that kickstarted it. So, in 2021, when we redid the zoning ordinance code, that was kind of my first introduction into the idea and concept of parking minimums. And, we had a great, very robust discussion at that point. I was really pleased to be learning about it and really pleased with the results, I think, too, for our community. I can't say that they're directly correlated, but I know that as we began to scale back our parking, we saw taxable retail space in our community expand with the expansion of Target, with the expansion of Shields, without having to expand the Dakota Square Mall footprint or anything else. They just kind of were able to gobble up a little bit more parking and really redevelop the way that they looked at parking as a tool rather than a burden or a requirement. So that was really cool to see. And as, again, communities of all sizes, Wilmer, Minnesota being about 20,000 people, Richmond, Virginia being a far larger community, and communities such as Nashville, eliminating parking minimums in their community. It's kind of proved this living lab right now that we're watching in real time, the experiments of what happens to a community when that occurs. And one of the things that has also been brought up is about cost of living impacts and housing equity impacts, and some of the ways that parking minimums can sometimes really increase the costs of housing development in particular and the cost of living. So I guess looking at all those pieces together, I wanted to have this conversation for our community. I have a hunch that we're probably doing fairly well in the grand scheme of things if this were a spectrum, but I also know that you don't want to fall behind on something like this because years of failure to reevaluate the applicableness of a policy leads to a huge knee-jerk reaction of playing catch-up. And so I'd rather stay on top of it. And would love to have those conversations with all of us.
Tim, I just wonder, in all that you researched and all that you experienced looking at parking, was there anybody ever making a link between minimal parking or no parking minimums and the advent of parking meters?
I think there is probably a broader discussion about again, parking being used as a tool rather than a burden or a mandate. So people being able to decide, I do want to build parking, but in that case, I may use it in different ways for different things. And Mr. Billingsley, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as a follow-up, we're talking about off-street parking here, and metered parking usually is on-street. And
Oh, yeah.
I believe the state legislature has prohibited metered parking in the state of North Dakota. I don't think you see that anywhere throughout the state, so I don't believe, yeah. Our attorney's coming
I
up.
thought
to-
Fargo had joined.
Yes, Chairman, Commissioners, Century Code does have a provision related to parking meters, and essentially they're prohibited on street municipal roads.
Yep. But the regulations we're talking about, Commissioner Kibler, are for off-street parking, not on-street parking. Okay?
Thank you. Any other discussion? Great questions, by the way.
I think, again, as the person who started the conversation, I would maybe challenge all of us in our own corners of life and the people we interact with, our connections, to maybe do a little bit of homework too and come back with either anecdotal or, hard evidence from the corners that we represent, knowing that Some of us are citizens, some of us represent industry or have connections to all of those relationships, and really think about this community in particular. What do we know from our Minot developers? What do we know from people who regularly interact with big box stores? What do we know from just normal everyday life here to bring to the discussion?
Thank you.
Okay.
And after that, we have any other business?
If it's all right with you, Chairman, I would like to introduce to the Planning Commission our new Associate Planner, Dan Falconer. He started with us a few weeks back. He's already shown himself to be a valuable member of the division. And I just wanted to introduce you guys all. You can welcome him to the Planning Division team.
Welcome, Dan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, with that, any other business? Okay, seeing none, meeting has been adjourned.